Hey guys, tonight, we slip quietly into another world, one where the stars flicker over black water, the waves whisper like old stories, and the air smells faintly of salt-wet stone and seaweed crushed underfoot. You're not in a bustling city or standing before some towering monument. You're on the edge of something softer, an ancient curve of coastline where Hawaiians once shaped the sea into circles and coaxed fish to stay. You're barefoot. The sand is cool. The tide has just begun to retreat, leaving behind pools like mirrors. And in those pools, the shadows move. But they're not afraid of you. They've seen your kind before generations ago. They remember. This is where we begin, on the shore of an old loco, near a fish pond. And not just any fish pond. A perfectly engineered centuries-old system made from nothing but rocks, hands, tides, and time. You'll step through brackish shallows, hear the echo of slipper shells clicking under your feet, and follow the curved line of a wall that's older than the paper maps drawn of this place. Now, don't get too confident. You probably wouldn't survive farming fish here without first spending decades learning the tides, memorizing moon phases, and earning the right to step into the pond itself. You'd need permission from the chief. You'd need the right chance. And most importantly, you'd need patience. These ponds work on island time, which is already slow, but also fish time, which is practically glacial. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing which corner of the world we're sharing stories with tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch near the shore, resting one hand against a lava rock still damp with tide. The rock is warm, not just from sun, but from memory. You're at the threshold of a pond that doesn't look like much to a casual glance. But if you trace the edge, follow its circle with your eyes, you'll start to see the design. The pond curves inward from the sea, protected by a semicircular wall of black stone meticulously stacked and engineered to hold against waves and time. That wall is called the quappa, and it doesn't just mark the edge of the pond, it makes the pond. Without it, the ocean wouldn't know where to pause. Here's your first historical fact. Loco Aire were a marvel of indigenous engineering. Built centuries before Western contact, these fish ponds use tidal flows and careful wall design to control fish movement and create a sustainable, renewable food source. There are over 400 recorded across the Hawaiian Islands. The tide has started to slide in again, brushing against the base of the quappa. A few silvery flashes dart past your feet, baby fish called pua, just beginning to explore the brackish water between the ocean and the pond. You glance up. There's no fence, no sign, no gate, but you can feel it. You're not alone here. These ponds were never just water and stone. They were places alive, protected, named, and remembered. Many Hawaiians considered them sacred, not because of ceremony, but because they sustained life. A well-kept pond could feed hundreds of people. That's no small thing when you're surrounded by salt water and volcanoes. Here's something quirky. In certain parts of Hawaii, there were stories of fish ponds being alive in the literal sense. Some said they breathed with the tide. Others said they had a spirit keeper, usually a large eel or fish that no one dared to catch. Children were warned not to throw stones or urinate near the pond or risk waking its wrath. A scolding from Grandma often came with the phrase, "You feed the pond, or the pond will feed on you." You watch the water rise slowly. It doesn't splash, it seeps. This is not the surf crashing on a beach. This is the sea exhaling, a calm breath against the bones of the island. And somehow, you start to relax with it. A bird calls one of the night herons. You squint to see it skimming low over the surface, wings almost touching the water. It lands near the edge of the pond and peers down, waiting, hunting. Even the birds know this pond has secrets. Historians still argue whether the very first loco, Ai, came from Kauai or Molokai, or whether different islands developed their own designs independently. But most agree on one thing: these weren't accidents. They required planning tools, knowledge of stone, and deep collaboration. You couldn't build one alone, and you certainly couldn't farm it alone. A flicker of movement catches your eye in the water again. Not a fish this time, just your own reflection broken by ripple. You stand and stretch, looking back toward the shoreline. It's quiet, but not silent. The island hums with invisible energy. Insects wind surf ancestors. You turn again, toward the pond. The wall awaits. You step carefully along the quappa, that stone wall, separating the sea from the pond. Its surface is uneven. Lava rock doesn't care for comfort, and slick in places where moss has crept in, nourished by centuries of tide and mist. Every few feet, a tiny crab darts sideways, offended by your presence, as if you're the one disturbing its evening walk. Your feet feel the warmth of the stones, some of them laid centuries ago, passed hand to hand, person to person, family to family. Building this wall wasn't an afternoon's labor. It was an act of community, a literal alignment of knowledge and muscle. The rocks were chosen for shape-weight fit. No mortar, just friction, gravity, and skill. You pause near a notch in the wall, a small opening, no wider than your shoulders. It looks like a mistake, like a gap someone forgot to finish. But it's not. It's the makaha, a sluice gate made of closely placed vertical slats where water can move in and out with the tide, but adult fish cannot escape. It's clever, diabolically so. Tiny fish can swim through as pua welcome guests, but once they grow inside the pond, they're trapped, nourished by the rich ecosystem within until they're ready to be harvested. A self-replenishing pantry guarded by tide and timber. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The makaha was the technological heart of the fish pond. Ancient Hawaiians understood fluid dynamics well enough to construct gates that balanced water flow, oxygenation, and selective fish entry. Some even adjusted the angle of slats depending on the season or species being farmed. You crouch to look through the slats. The pond beyond glistened smooth as polished obsidian. You catch a glimpse of a few large fish cruising just beneath the surface. Ama, the Hawaiian mullet. Highly prized, slow-moving, perfect for aquaculture. They glide like spirits barely breaking the water's surface tension. Now for your quirky tidbit. Some families passed down fish whispers, songs, and chants that they claimed would calm the fish and bring them closer to shore. A few were lullabies, a few were trade secrets, and some were just so beautiful that even if they didn't work, they deserved to be sung anyway. You rise and look back toward the shore. A narrow path winds inland through ironwood trees and pandanus groves. But your journey tonight remains here on the edge where saltwater brushes stone. The breeze picks up slightly, carrying the faint scent of sweetgrass and smoke, someone somewhere cooking fish over a wood fire. And suddenly your stomach remembers that it exists. The pond, meanwhile, doesn't rush. Its rhythms have nothing to do with your cravings. It takes time to grow good fish. Time and stillness. You start to realize why this place isn't just food, it's philosophy. Farming on land is full of bustle digging, weeding, sowing, reaping. But pond work, it's slower, watchful. You're not planting, you're inviting. Historians still argue whether these fish ponds were originally exclusive to alii, the chiefly class, or whether they were first managed communally and later became royal holdings. Some oral traditions suggest both were true depending on island era and even lunar calendar. You find another macaw further down the wall, this one half submerged and covered in seaweed. A small octopus coils near the base, barely visible, pretending to be a shadow. You pretend not to see it, respectful mutual anonymity. It doesn't want attention, neither do you. Stepping lightly, you round the curve of the quappa until it loops back toward the land again. The tide has turned the sea, now tugging gently away from the pond, like a lullaby ending its verse. You find a dry rock, sit down, and dangle your feet just above the waterline. Tiny silver flashes swirl below nehu anchovy-like fish that glitter when the light catches just right. They're not here by accident. They're bait fish, sometimes introduced intentionally into ponds to feed the larger fish. Even the food has food. Above you, a star appears, then another. You tilt your head back, and the whole sky stretches open, clear and vast. You realize the pond mirrors it. Black sky above, black water below, and you balanced between. Don't fall in, a voice murmurs beside you. You jump slightly. It's an old man barefoot holding a wooden rake and wearing a threadbare shirt that might be older than you. He doesn't look at you directly, just keeps raking algae off the rocks with a slow, practiced motion. Slippery, he adds. You nod sheepishly. He continues his quiet work. A caretaker, maybe a descendant of caretakers, maybe just a man who loves the pond enough to tend it without permission. The stars wheel slowly overhead. The fish drift silently beneath. The wall holds. You leave the old man behind, though his presence seems to linger like the moss on the rocks, quiet, unshakable, and green with knowing. Your path now curves inland, but only slightly, enough to feel the damp air shift into something earthier, where brine fades into loam and the scent of ferns begins to edge out salt. You follow the ditch, yes, the ditch. Not glamorous, but crucial. It's called an awai, and it's not just a trench. It's the vascular system of the pond. The awai channels fresh water from streams into the loco, regulating salinity, cooling the pond, and feeding the subtle dance between salt and fresh that certain fish crave. A fish pond without a good awai is a bathtub with dreams of greatness. You crouch to peer inside. Water trickles through clear and steady over small stones lined with alai red clay to prevent leakage. The builders of this channel knew their materials. They chose alai because it packed tight, resisted erosion, and gave the water that signature reddish tint, like the pond itself was blushing under scrutiny. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Early Hawaiians mastered hydrology centuries before the first Western engineers arrived. Their awai systems didn't just serve ponds, they irrigated entire taro patches, regulated rainfall, and helped avoid seasonal flooding. They were communal efforts maintained by the Kanahiki land managers and laborers alike. But this ditch, it hums with a softer purpose. Not just crop thirst, but fish thirst. Now, for your quirky tidbit. In some regions, kids were tasked with catching the small fish that tried to sneak up the awai in the wrong direction. They'd lay palm fronds across the channel and wait barefoot nets in hand for the rebellious swimmers to appear. Fish patrol, Hawaiian childhood style. As you rise again and move down the trail, the forest thickens just enough to hush the wind. Pandanus roots trip lightly over the path like frozen tentacles. A manu iwa, a long-tailed tropic bird, glides high overhead, its feathers white against indigo. Then the clearing opens. Here stands the Hail Kia'ai, the guardian house. Not large, just a thatched roof shelter, open on the sides, perched at the point where land pond and stream converge. Inside hangs a wooden gourd, some bundles of lahala mats, and a carved ki figure lashed to a pole. You don't know if the figure is meant to protect the pond or mark its sacredness. Possibly both. In old Hawaii, symbols did double duty like that. You pause at the edge of the shelter and lean against the beam. A soft breeze lifts the mat walls and reveals a view across the entire pond. It's like standing at the hinge of a great circular door, the sea behind you, the forest beside you, the fish swirling somewhere in the middle. A cup of water sits in a carved wooden bowl by the beam. It's not for drinking. It's an offering. Or a placeholder, a small reminder that humans aren't the only ones with claims to this space. Historians still argue whether the Hail Kiai was primarily ceremonial or functional. Some believe it was a resting place for the Kiai Loco, the guardian of the pond. Others see it as a vigil station where shifts of watchers made sure predators, human or otherwise, didn't raid the bounty. The truth, as usual, might be both. A rustle draws your eyes to the side. A girl, maybe 12 years old, is balancing a woven basket of taro stems and seaweed. She doesn't speak, just nods and sets the basket down beside the water's edge. Then she vanishes into the trees like a breeze wearing sandals. You glance at the offering again. Fresh limu kohu, a kind of red seaweed with a sharp, clean scent, and 3 kalo leaves still damp from the stream. The meal isn't for you, but the symbolism is clear. Give and the pond gives back. You hear a soft splash. Down near the curve of the awai, a fish jumps briefly airborne, catching moonlight, and then gone again into the water's skin. Back in the shelter, a gecko chirps once. It's hard not to feel like everything here is in conversation. The wind, the fish, the girl, the old man, even the ditch. You lie back on the mat, careful not to disturb the wooden bowl. The scent of lauhala rises faintly sweet, sun-warmed, slightly dusty. The mat creaks under your weight. The shelter breathes around you. You close your eyes for just a second. When you open them, stars fill the rafters. You rise just before the sun does not because of some alarm, but because the sky itself starts to press on your eyelids like a gentle but persistent ant. Pale silver light trickles across the forest canopy, brushing the tops of breadfruit trees and nudging the mist out from between their branches. You stretch, and the mat creaks under you once more. The Hail Kiai feels smaller in daylight, less dreamlike, but still sacred. The offering bowl is gone. In its place sits a single nioi flower, small, white, almost shy-looking. A gesture of thanks, perhaps. Or maybe of welcome. It's hard to know. You step outside and see the pond again, now full in morning glow. Its surface catches every color the dawn throws at it. Gold blush, the faintest hint of green. You see movement in the water fins ripples the gleam of light on a fish's back. The system is alive. Now for your mainstream historical fact, these circular fish ponds, or loko ia kuapa, were often built along the coast, where fresh water from mountain streams mixed with the salt water of the sea. Their semicircular walls of rock, coral, and earth created controlled ecosystems ideal for fish, like awa-awa milkfish and ama-ama mullet, which thrived in brackish water. You make your way along the stone wall, careful with your footing. These stones are old, placed with care by hands that understood not only structure but story. It's said that in some families, each stone had a name, a story, a laugh, or a sorrow tied to its shape. You wonder if this one beneath your foot was laid during a celebration or a funeral. You come to the makaha, the sluice gate. This is where things get clever. Made of carefully spaced vertical sticks or slats tied together with coconut fiber, the makaha allows water to move freely between the pond and the sea, but keeps fish inside. Juvenile fish swim in through the gaps during high tide, drawn by the nutrients in calm waters. As they grow, they become too large to escape the same way they entered. Gentle, ingenious, and very Hawaiian. You squat near the gate, watching the water rush and swirl. Seaweed clings to the slats like old threads in a loom. A crab clicks sideways, then disappears. This place hums not with noise, but with motion. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some traditions, caretakers would speak to the fish, not metaphorically out loud. Whispers of encouragement, promises of care, even lullabies. Whether the fish understood is up for debate, but the ritual wasn't about communication, it was about respect, about being heard by the space, even if not answered. A canoe arrives in the distance, one man rowing slowly, his paddle slicing the water in lazy arcs. He wears a red malo and a wide-brimmed hat woven from dried pandanus. At the front of the canoe sits a gourd sealed with wax and a small bundle wrapped in ti leaves. Breakfast probably, or an offering, or both. The canoe glides toward a wooden platform just beyond the curve of the wall. You see others there now, 3 women, 2 children, a dog with sandy feet. The dog shakes once, spraying droplets like glass shards into the sunlight, then curls into a warm, bored ball of fur. You follow the wall to join them. The stones are warm now. The wind tastes faintly of fish and ti blossoms. One of the women waves you over. She holds out a bowl made from half a coconut shell. Inside poi, thick, fermented, and smooth as river mud. She doesn't say anything, just gestures toward the sunrise, then to the bowl. You understand, it's not about flavor, it's about rhythm. You eat. Historians still argue whether daily pond gatherings like this were work rituals, spiritual meetings, or informal councils. The truth, again, probably blends all three. In Hawaiian, life roles weren't rigid. A farmer might also be a priest. A fisherwoman might chant genealogies. Function and form flowed like tidewater, mingling, adapting. You finish your poi and hand back the shell. The woman nods, then returns to her task, sorting small fish by hand, lifting them gently into woven baskets. Each movement is quiet, deliberate, and strangely musical. The children nearby are building a miniature pond out of sand and palm leaves. One of them splashes water from a gourd into the moat. Another lines the walls with pebbles. You can't help but smile. This isn't just play, it's practice. A reenactment of care, of continuity, of tending something circular and alive. The man from the canoe joins them now. He opens the gourd and pours water into a shallow dish near the fish baskets. Then he lights a bit of dried grass. The smoke rises straight up before twisting toward the sea. You exhale slowly. There's a rhythm here, one you don't quite know, but feel yourself sinking to. A heartbeat beneath your thoughts. A current that pulls not hard, but steadily. A rooster crows far off. You're not ready to leave yet, not even close. You linger near the stone wall, watching how the morning unfolds like a soft chant across the pond. There's no announcement, no bell or horn, but somehow everyone seems to know what to do and when. A woven net is stretched between two koa wood posts, and two older men begin to lower it gently into the water, humming as they work. The net isn't to trap exactly, it's to guide, to redirect. You trail your fingers along the top of the wall, feeling each stone's rough surface still slick from sea spray. Just below the waterline, silvery fish flash like tiny mirrors, their darting bodies catching the light. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Hawaiian fish ponds like these weren't just practical innovations. They were sacred spaces deeply connected to the spiritual and social fabric of the islands. Each pond had its own name lineage of caretakers and often a resident deity. Stewardship was seen as both a privilege and a responsibility, tied to kuleana, the Hawaiian concept of reciprocal obligation between land and people. The two fishermen give a subtle whistle, and the younger children scamper away from the edge. The water swirls, disturbed by a graceful arc of a woven basket being lowered like a ladle. A dozen or so ama fish wiggle inside their bodies, plump and silvery. They're transferred into a wooden trough, filled with cooler seawater. You notice there's no rush. Every action seems measured like a ceremony disguised as morning work. You think again of the net, not a trap, but a suggestion. Maybe there's a lesson in that. Nearby, one of the women begins to chant a low, rhythmic mele. The sound is half sung, half whispered, and the words ripple across the surface of the pond like a windless breeze. It's a chant of thanks, of blessing, of balance. You don't understand the Hawaiian fully, but the intent is unmistakable honor, what feeds you. Now, here's your quirky tidbit. In some island traditions, fish ponds were believed to echo the heavens. Their shapes, circular, crescent, or oval, were modeled after constellations, and the movement of fish within them was thought to correspond with lunar cycles. In this way, farming fish wasn't just an earthly act, it was a mirrored ritual of the stars. The chant fades and silence returns, but not the awkward kind, the kind that fills you up. You walk along the outer edge of the pond, now tracing its curve as it follows the shoreline like a hand cradling water. At one end, a small grove of hala trees rustles with dry, papery leaves. Beneath them, someone has left an offering, a bowl of taro, a twist of sea salt, and a small stone wrapped in tie leaf. You sit there for a moment, letting the shade cool your face. The stone wall of the fish pond snakes behind you, its path partly hidden by wild ginger and clusters of naupaka. From this angle, the pond looks like a polished coin tucked into the island's palm. A gentle breeze blows in from the sea, bringing the sharp tang of salt and the faint, sweet note of blooming plumeria. You close your eyes and let it pass over you. Footsteps crunch softly in the sand behind you. You turn, and it's the old woman who handed you the poi earlier. She doesn't speak, just nods, then sits beside you. She places a bowl of water between you and adds 3 petals, red, white, and yellow, then stirs them slowly with her finger. She looks at you, one eyebrow raised. You mirror her, dipping a finger into the water and tracing a slow circle. She smiles, not big, not dramatic, just enough to let you know you passed some kind of test. She points toward the fish pond and finally speaks. Not just food, she says quietly. Memory? You don't need her to explain. You feel it. This isn't just a structure. It's a memory kept alive in stone, water, and motion. A recipe handed down not in ink, but in action. Historians still argue whether early Hawaiians independently developed these pond systems or whether they were adaptations of Polynesian techniques brought during migration. The truth likely lies somewhere in between a mingling of imported knowledge and local genius evolving with every tide. The woman stands slowly dusting sand from her skirt. She leaves the petaled bowl behind. You stare at the floating colors drifting in a lazy spiral. You rise too, brushing your palms together. The pond, now midday bright, shimmers like glass smudged with dreams. You see birds skimming the surface. Alai keokeo, the Hawaiian coot, with its jerky little strut and beady eyes. One of them pecks at something unseen, then dashes off with a proud flap of its wings. You return to the stone path. The sea is just over the next rise, but you don't rush toward it. Something about the pond still calls to you, not as a tourist, not as a visitor, but as someone trying to remember something you've never actually known. Another wave of laughter rolls across the pond's far side. The children are now splashing in a shallow inlet, using long sticks to corral imaginary fish. You hear the word mo'o tossed around Hawaiian for lizard or spirit. Apparently, one of the children saw something wriggle through the reeds and now insists it's a pond guardian. You grin. Every good system needs a guardian, even if it's only 6 inches long and enjoys being blamed for lost sandals. The shadows begin to shift. Lunch isn't far, but the story of this pond is only just beginning. The sun overhead is no longer gentle, it's warm, insistent, and gilding every surface with a sleepy golden hue. You squint through the shimmer of light bouncing off the pond's surface, watching as another group of caretakers approaches from the path above. This time they carry bundles wrapped in kapa cloth, tightly folded packages that rustle with mystery. You trail behind them, bare feet, brushing sand and crushed coral. The path winds along the inner curve of the pond until you reach a shaded platform built of lauhala mats and driftwood beams. It's not a hut exactly, more like a lean-to lounge, meant for resting repairing nets and gossiping gently while your legs dangle over the side. You sit near the edge, pretending you belong. Here's your mainstream historical fact: traditional Hawaiian aquaculture was not just about trapping fish, but controlling growth, size, and timing. Fish pond caretakers called kia'ai loko aiai would monitor the maturity of the fish and manage their diet by introducing certain seaweeds and algae that thrived within the pond's unique brackish environment. Essentially, it was precision farming centuries before spreadsheets or pH testing kits. You lean in as one of the bundles is unwrapped. Inside, long strands of limu seaweed collected fresh that morning. One type, a bright green limu. Ele looks like it's still moving, still remembering the tide. Another with reddish fronds smells sharp and metallic. Each strand is placed delicately into the water, coaxed beneath the surface, and pinned between shallow stones so it will take root. A nearby elder whispers that these aren't just fish snacks, they're soil. Healthy fish need happy limu, he says with a wink, then pops a piece into his mouth like a gummy treat. You try some too. It's briny with a crisp snap. Not bad. You might not crave it later, but you respect it now. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some ponds, families were said to whisper to the limu as they planted it, believing that seaweed raised on kind voices would grow faster and attract gentler fish. Whether that's fact or just a lovely superstition, you're not sure. But you catch yourself murmuring anyway as you place a strand near the shallows just in case. The man beside you chuckles softly, but says nothing. He's busy checking the rocks for signs of movement, tiny crabs, young mollusks, and anemones that pulse like the pond's breath. Every creature in this place has a role, even the ones too small to see. Suddenly, a breeze lifts the edge of the kapa bundle and reveals something unexpected, a small carving, a figure no bigger than your thumb, made of polished bone. It rests in a woven nest of dried grass, and it stares at the sky with wide, expressionless eyes. The old man notices you noticing. Ki aqua, he says, a fish god. He places it gently into the water, where it sinks without resistance, vanishing beneath the dark surface. Every pond has a spirit, he adds. This one likes stories. Historians still argue whether such figures were purely spiritual offerings or practical talismans, charms meant to influence fish behavior, weather patterns, or even the luck of a particular family. Some say they were passed down through generations. Others claim they were remade every season, their power renewed only by constant retelling. Either way, you feel the weight of the gesture. Not fear, not reverence, just weight. The kind that settles on your skin like salt. You rise slowly and make your way to the far end of the pond, where a narrow water gate opens to the sea, a makaha framed with slats of wood that allow smaller fish to swim in from the ocean, but block the big ones from escaping. You crouch low, peering through the gate as water rushes past in slow, sucking surges. A small ope shrimp darts past. You flinch, even though it's only the length of your finger. This gate is genius, simple, effective, and symbolic. A hinge between freedom and stewardship. An agreement carved into tide and wood. You reach out and brush your hand along the slats. Cool, slick, smooth with the polish of years. A woman in a wide straw hat appears beside you. She's holding a basket of smooth stones, each painted with small symbols. She drops one gently into the shallows and watches it settle. Markers, she explains. So we remember what was planted when the limu was fed, who cleaned the gate last. You nod, looking at the others already in the water. Green dots, red swirls, simple triangles etched in black. An aquatic calendar, half mystical, half administrative. You're not surprised. Everything in this place hums with a mix of function and poetry. The woman glances at the horizon. Sun's leaning, she says. Pond's about to shift. You don't ask what that means. You just follow her back along the path, past the hollow trees, past the bowl of petals now tipped over by wind, past a line of black volcanic stones leading to the fire pit. A small flame has already been lit. Someone is preparing lunch. The scent reaches you before the smoke does roasted kukui, nut-tangy fermented taro, and a hint of sea salt warming over the coals. You follow your nose down the sloping path where a cooking area has been arranged beneath a grove of tall coconut palms, their shadows slowly stretching with the sun's descent. Everything is stone wood or fiber, no metal tools in sight, save for a single worn blade that gleams dully in the firelight. A young boy is tending a flat cooking stone with the seriousness of a priest. He's flipping thin rounds of breadfruit, their edges curling slightly, hissing when oil from his palm leaves touches the heat. You sit nearby on a smooth log polished by decades of use. Someone hands you a hollowed gourd, half filled with cool awa root tea, earthy bitter and relaxing in all the right ways. You take a sip and feel your jaw unclench. Time slows again in rhythm with the flick of the fire and the gentle slap of breadfruit against stone. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In early Hawaiian fish pond communities, food was not just sustenance, it was timing. The preparation of communal meals was often synchronized with pond care. Feeding the people, feeding the fish, these acts were twinned, and they followed lunar rhythms. Full moons meant different catches. New moons brought quiet cleaning. The moon didn't just light the night sky, it scheduled the menu. You glance toward the pond just visible between the trees. A group of children is splashing at the edge, supervised loosely by two elders with the look of retired warriors. One of them is weaving a net, not for catching fish, but for drying seaweed. His fingers move so fast they blur. You blink twice and the net is suddenly 3 hands wider. You marvel at the rhythm of it all. The pond is a pulse, and every person here moves in sync with its invisible beat. The boy offers you a round of roasted breadfruit. It's crisp, smoky, and unexpectedly sweet. You nod in thanks, and he smiles shy but proud. Now for your quirky tidbit. Some old legends claim that certain fish ponds could sing. Not in the literal sense, but in the way the water moved through the Makaha gate, or the way the reeds along the shore rustled at night. It was said you could tell a pond's health by its voice. A quiet pond, sleeping. A babbling pond, joyful. A pond that hummed low and steady, that one was wise and possibly watching you. You lean back, ears open. There's a breeze teasing the palm fronds, a quiet chuckle from the cooking area, and the faint lapping of the pond. And yes, there's a tone to it. Faint, deep. Maybe it's just the wind, maybe not. The woman from earlier, she of the basket and the calendar stones, approaches with a bundle of tie leaves. She kneels beside the fire pit, unwrapping small parcels of marinated fish, each piece resting in a cradle of greens. Carefully, she places them on hot stones, layering more leaves and damp cloths on top. You offer to help. She lets you place one final stone on the stack. It fits perfectly, as though shaped by story rather than time. She turns to you. This pond used to feed 30 families, she says softly. Now it feeds only memories, but that's enough. Her words don't carry sorrow, they carry peace, like someone tending a grave garden not to grieve, but to remember how things once bloomed. Historians still argue whether these ancient ponds were strictly communal, strictly royal, or something in between. Some records suggest certain alii Hawaiian nobles held exclusive rights to specific ponds and their yields. Others describe elaborate sharing systems with portions divided among villages like slices of moonlight on water. The truth is always swims somewhere between. You finish the last sip of your tea. A warm drowsiness begins to pool in your limbs. In the distance, conch shells begin to sound low, echoing calls that bounce off the cliffs like voices from the sea gods themselves. Not a warning, not a summons, just a reminder that the day is tilting into evening. As you rise to your feet, someone passes you a small stone with a swirl carved into it. You look up in question, but they're already gone, lost in the shadows of the trees. You pocket the stone. It's smooth and cool, heavier than it should be. You walk the short path back to the edge of the pond, where the shadows stretch long and the water begins to reflect not just the sky, but the firelight flickering behind you. The pond is no longer just a structure. It is a presence. and you finally have been acknowledged by it. You return to the water's edge where dusk lays its violet fingers over everything: the trees, the rocks, the surface of the pond, now glassy and hushed. Gone is the brightness of mid-afternoon, replaced by something cooler, gentler. You can hear insects beginning their night song layered beneath the occasional plop of fish breaking the surface. Tonight, you're being introduced to the mekaha, the traditional sluice gates that sit between the open ocean and the pond. From where you're standing, they look like a simple wooden barrier, a frame of lashed logs and woven reeds. But step closer, and you'll see the genius. They are wide enough to let baby fish enter from the sea, but too narrow for adult fish to swim back out. It's passive aquaculture at its finest. No net casting, no feed tossing, just the rhythm of the tides, the lure of calm, brackish water, and the quiet understanding that nature, if observed with patience, will do most of the work for you. Here's your mainstream historical fact: makaha gates date back centuries and were often engineered with such precision that some remained in use for generations without major repairs. They weren't just functional, they were tuned to each location's unique wave and current patterns, making each pond a custom solution. An elder joins you at the gate, barefoot, lean eyes sharpened by time. He gestures for you to squat beside him. Together, you watch the water flowing between the slats. You don't need to chase the fish, he murmurs. They come to you. You nod slowly, trying not to disturb the balance of the moment. He lifts a piece of driftwood from the sand and traces a crude fish on a rock beside you. Our ancestors didn't own the ocean, he says, but they asked it to stay a little while. Then he places the driftwood upright in the sand and walks away, leaving you with your thoughts and that silent gate. Now for your quirky tidbit. In some ponds, keepers swore by certain chants. Oli sung softly at sunrise or dusk to encourage a good harvest. These were not loud or theatrical. They were whispered, half-sung, half-prayer. Some even believed the fish had favorite songs. And if you forgot the words, the catch would forget to show up. You sit beside the gate a little longer, humming tunelessly just in case. A breeze picks up, ruffling the fronds and cooling your cheeks. There's a chill, but it's not unfriendly. It's the kind that reminds you you're part of something larger than your own skin. You trace the fish, drawing again, then stand to follow the curve of the wall where stone meets sea. The lava rocks underfoot are slick, but worn flat from centuries of feet. Some were carried here from inland valleys, miles away, chosen not for weight, but for resonance. When tapped, they ring. Barely audible, yes, but ring they do. Historians still argue whether the earliest Loko'aya Hawaiian fish ponds were independently developed or inspired by Pacific Island neighbors like the Tahitians or Tongans. Some evidence points to shared maritime knowledge passed between navigators. Others believe the engineering evolved in place shaped by the island's unique needs and geography. It's a debate held in both academic circles and oceanfront gatherings where the waves argue back with their own rhythms. You reach a break in the wall where the surf sprays upward in short bursts. It's here you notice a bundle of leaves tucked between the stones, an offering, probably ti or kukui, a gift to the sea, a plea to the pond, or maybe just a reminder that someone passed this way and saw beauty worth honoring. You leave it undisturbed, stepping carefully around the spot. The light continues to fade, and with it the outlines of the world soften. The edges of trees blur. The sky becomes more idea than object. And the fish, they flicker near the surface, just out of reach, moving like thoughts not yet formed. You find yourself sitting again, back on the same rock from earlier, the one that holds the swirl-carved stone now resting in your pocket. You run your thumb across it, as if polishing memory into shape. Behind you, the cooking fires have gone quiet. The meal is done, the story's paused, the night stretching ahead like a scroll, waiting for ink. You stay a while longer by the water, watching shadows trade places with stars. And somewhere just beneath the surface, a ripple breaks, small, precise, deliberate. The fish are listening. The moon is high now, casting a shimmering path across the water, as if inviting you to walk out and meet the night halfway. But you stay grounded, your bare feet pressed against the earth's cool skin, feeling the pulse of the land beneath you. The fish pond is quieter now. No workers, no chants, just the hush of wind through palm fronds and the occasional bubble rising from below. You're told this hour was sacred to many early Hawaiian caretakers of the Loko Ie, not for work, but for reflection, a time when the pond was left alone, when even the most diligent caretakers would pull back, allowing the moon to cast its own judgments on the harvest to come. Tonight, you are among the keepers, at least in spirit. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Hawaiian aquaculture wasn't just about building ponds. It was a complex relationship between land and sea, managed by experts called kahuna and families known as konahiki, who oversaw the resources set rules about harvest times and ensured that fishing practices remained sustainable generation after generation. You sit back against a sloped rock, worn smooth by decades of watching. You imagine one of those kanahiki resting here 2 centuries ago, perhaps with a notebook of kapa cloth and charcoal tallying tides, fish cycles, and moon phases, recording not just numbers, but dreams. Beside you, a cluster of limu seaweed drifts gently at the pond's edge, catching the light like tangled lace. Some was edible, some medicinal, and some, they say, was used in love charms. Certain limu varieties were gathered during specific moons, offered to a crush, and if the recipient wore it in their hair, romance bloomed. If they fed it to the pigs instead, well, you'd better try someone else. That's your quirky tidbit for tonight. You reach out to touch one of the fronds, but stop just shy, not wanting to disturb it. It floats freely with a purpose of its own. From the far edge of the pond, you hear the soft creak of bamboo, a gate shifting in the wind, or maybe something more deliberate. You turn your head slowly watching. A man walks along the stone wall, lantern in hand, not rushing, not even looking at you. He wears a kapa cloak and steps with the familiarity of someone who's done this every night of his life. He pauses near the sluice gate, lowers the lantern, and kneels. You don't interrupt. This feels like ritual. He scoops a bit of water in his hand, holds it up to the moonlight, then releases it again. A gesture so simple, you nearly miss the weight of it. Some say keepers believed the pond had moods, that some nights the water welcomed you and others it warned you to stay away. That's why some would test it, offering a small scoop and waiting to see if the ripples returned smooth. If they did, you were welcome. If they fractured and darted back best, to let the fish sleep. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were widespread religious practice or simply personal habits passed down within families. There are no formal books on pond etiquette, just stories, gestures, and half-remembered advice whispered over firelight. You turn your gaze back to the water, trying to read the mood. It looks still, but you can't be sure. The man with the lantern stands again and disappears beyond a bend in the wall, the light growing dimmer until it's gone entirely. You rise, brushing the sand from your palms, and decide to take the long way around the pond. The walk is uneven stones jutting out like misplaced teeth, but manageable. As you round the far side, you spot something strange, a carved idol, barely knee-high, nestled between 2 rocks. Its features are worn, maybe a Kie spirit image, or maybe just a rock that got lucky. You don't touch it, just nod in its direction because that feels appropriate. The air is cooler here, a little saltier, carrying the breath of the ocean beyond. You smell sea spray and wet stone, and beneath that a faint trace of fermented taro, someone's poi, fermenting quietly in a gourd, perhaps buried under leaves nearby. You sit on a low ledge resting. Above you, the sky thickens with stars, and the constellations shift toward stories you don't know yet, but feel you've always heard. You feel the weight of time settle gently on your shoulders, not heavy, just present. The pond exhales, and you too let go of a breath you hadn't noticed you were holding. You wake, or maybe you never truly slept, at the edge of the pond where the sky has begun to pale. It's not quite dawn, but the stars are thinning, and the horizon is dipped in that faint, bruised blue that comes just before the light. The air tastes different now, less salt, more dew, a night's breath giving way to day. You stretch slowly, mindful not to disturb the quiet, and trace a circle in the sand with your toe, mimicking the shape of the fish pond itself, round, enclosed, endlessly flowing. You wonder how many generations have done the same. Soon, you hear the rustle of feet across the leaves. Others are arriving. Early risers, caretakers, apprentices, men and women both dressed in light kapa cloth, their hair still damp from sleep or sea. No one talks much. There's a peace in this hour that doesn't invite chatter. Only nods, murmurs the soft clink of calabashes being set down beside baskets. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Early Hawaiian fish ponds, or loko'aio, were often maintained communally. Though chiefly classes owned the land, the work was shared by extended families, men and women alike, tending walls, gathering limu, and managing sluice gates. It wasn't just labor, it was lineage. As you watch, one woman moves toward the pond with a bamboo pole tipped with woven netting. She wades in without hesitation, her feet confident on the stone floor. Another follows this one, dragging a floating basket already half full of seaweed. You don't hear splashes, just the soft slosh of water displaced by calm, practiced hands. A boy runs past you, barefoot, giggling, carrying a wooden bucket half his size. He's scolded gently by a man with a voice like lava rock, deep and slow, but the boy doesn't slow down. You smile. The rhythm of the place has changed. Night's mystery has given way to morning purpose. You step forward, unsure if you're allowed, but no one stops you. Someone hands you a bundle of dried Thai leaves, just gestures, no words, and points toward a shallow edge where limu grows thick. You crouch beside the water, unwrapping the leaves to reveal small tools, a carved scraper, a fiber cord, and a woven pouch for gathering. You're not expected to be good, just gentle. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some Hawaiian traditions, it was said that limu responded better to being sung to. Harvesters would hum or chant softly, not for the plants necessarily, but to remind themselves to move slowly, respectfully, and never take too much. Even the seaweed, it seems, appreciated manners. You hum something under your breath, not a chant exactly, just a rhythm, and begin pulling the soft fronds from the stones. Some come easily, others resist. You learn to leave those. Beside you, a woman plucks a limp strand, inspects it, then tosses it behind her, where a chicken, yes, a chicken, struts forward and snatches it like treasure. You laugh. She doesn't look up, but the corner of her mouth twitches. You shift your gaze to the horizon. The sun hasn't risen, but its intent is obvious now. The rim of the world glows faint orange, casting a sheen across the pond that makes it look like warmed honey. And then, from farther down the wall, a conch shell blows. Not loud, not urgent, just once. It's the morning call. A line begins to form at the pond's edge. People bring small wooden trays, each holding something different. Taro salted fish, fresh greens, flour leis. Offerings, it seems, for the day ahead. Some are placed on a stone platform. Others are left on flat banana leaves at the water's edge. You contribute a piece of limu from your pouch, arranging it in a small spiral. The boy from earlier has returned this time, quieter, holding a flower in each hand. He places them on the water, then scampers back toward his family. The petals float for a long moment, drifting in slow circles like tiny canoes lost at sea. Historians still argue whether these morning rituals were strictly spiritual or simply cultural habits passed down for their calming rhythm. But one thing seems clear: they shaped the way people moved through the day, aware, connected, and accountable not just to each other, but to the land itself. You step back, brushing your hands dry on your kapa wrap, and watch the first beam of sunlight pierce through the trees. It hits the pond at just the right angle, igniting the water in a brief shimmer of gold. For a heartbeat, it feels like the whole world is catching its breath. And then, as quickly as it came, the gold fades into daylight. You look around. No one seems surprised. Just another morning in the fish pond. The sun climbs higher now, unhurried, but certain, like someone who's walked this path 1,000 times and knows every stone. Light spreads across the fish pond in warm layers, revealing more detail than you noticed in the dim hours before. The water takes on a clear emerald hue, and the fish, silver-striped and golden, move just beneath the surface, flickering like secrets. People have spread out into their roles. The older ones supervise from shaded spots, their eyes scanning the pond with a gaze that sees not only what is, but what should be. Children fetch things clumsily, but eagerly. The middle generation does the labor, hauling baskets, patching netting, adjusting the sluice gates with deft familiarity. It's a harmony of generations, each rhythm folded into the next. You walk along the outer wall, lava rock warmed by the sun, each stone carefully laid by hands long gone. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The walls of Loko'aio fish ponds were constructed without mortar, using dry stack techniques that balanced stone upon stone to allow just enough permeability. This kept the water circulating but protected the pond's fragile ecosystem from being swept away. A group of men is inspecting one such wall, now brushing seaweed from between stones, checking for any signs of shifting or collapse. One of them pulls out a long rod with a bent metal tip and prods at a gap. You watch, fascinated. The wall doesn't just hold water, it tells stories. Cracks, stains, even the kinds of snails clinging to the surface, they're all read like a language by the keepers of the pond. You're tempted to touch the stones, and when you do, they feel warm and ancient, somehow alive. Further along, you spot a curious figure crouching alone near the edge, where a smaller, narrower pond feeds into the main circle. He's arranging clusters of small stones in a fan shape and muttering to himself. His movements are slow but deliberate, and you realize he's not just passing time, he's performing something. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some Hawaiian traditions, fish pond workers used ho'oponopono, or spiritual cleansing rituals, to restore harmony, not just to families, but to the land and sea. If the pond was unproductive or off, a ritual would be performed to clear resentment or imbalance. The belief wasn't just spiritual, it was ecological. An unhealthy community led to an unhealthy pond. The man mutters a chant you can't quite hear. He straightens one stone, then another, then lets the rest be. He wipes his hands on his knees and rises slowly. He doesn't look at you, but you feel seen anyway. You step away, careful not to disturb the pattern. There's a slight commotion ahead. A group of teenagers has caught something in a net, and their laughter rings out sharp and bright. You approach, and they part to let you see a large mullet squirming and slapping against the woven fiber. One boy gently extracts it and holds it up like a trophy, the fish glinting in the sunlight. Then, without drama, he lowers it into a wooden bucket filled with clean pond water and walks off toward a shaded pen. No one cheers. No one boasts. The moment was about respect, not spectacle. You pause to absorb it, all the sweat and backs, the rhythm of work, the easy way everyone moves together like a single-wide family. Historians still argue whether this cohesion was enforced by strict kapu laws or nurtured through cultural consensus. But either way, the result was the same harmony between humans, fish, water, and stone. You follow a quiet path back toward the main enclosure, passing a woman carrying a bowl of fermented taro. She offers you a smile and a bit of poi on a folded leaf. You accept, and the flavor is sour, earthy, satisfying. She doesn't wait for thanks. She's already gone. Near the center of the pond, a man stands at the junction where fresh stream water feeds into the enclosure. He's adjusting a sluice gate, raising it slightly to allow more inflow. The mechanism is simple, just a carved wooden frame and some hand-woven mats, but its effect is profound. Fresh water revitalizes the pond, oxygenates the fish, and clears away excess salinity. It's the heartbeat of the entire system. He steps back and waits, watching the water swirl and level itself. You stand beside him in silence, both of you, listening to the gentle slap of current against rock. No commands, no rush, just quiet assurance that the work matters. Somewhere far off, a dog barks once. Closer, a pigeon coos from the thatched roof of a nearby hut. You're not sure what time it is anymore. But that doesn't seem to matter. You stretch your legs along the pond's curve, soaking in the heat rising from the lava stones, softened by a breeze that tastes faintly of salt and sweet grass. A light drizzle begins, not a downpour, but the kind that feels more like a blessing than weather. It beads across your shoulders, cool and weightless, then evaporates as quickly as it arrives. The clouds part. Sun again. You find yourself walking toward a smaller enclosure set slightly apart from the main fish pond. This one is shallower, almost like a nursery. And that's exactly what it is. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Early Hawaiians practiced a refined form of aquaculture that included rearing juvenile fish in protected subponds where they could grow without threat from predators or larger species. These transitional spaces were key to maintaining steady fish populations. A woman is wading knee-deep through the clear water, her hands cradling something gently just beneath the surface. She moves slowly, lifting a young fish, no longer a hatchling, not yet full-grown, and inspecting it. Satisfied, she releases it back. Nearby, children copy her movements in exaggerated mimicry, their fingers sweeping dramatically, their laughter rippling like the water. You squat down beside the pond's edge, watching the way the younger fish dart in and out of shadows. There's no visible fence, no net, only a clever use of tidal rhythms and subtle elevation shifts to keep them in place. Nature as collaborator, not container. Then you notice something unexpected, a group of teenagers not working, not fishing, but sketching. On wide palm leaves with bits of charcoal and flower pigments, they trace shapes, fish pond layouts, symbols that repeat. At first glance, it's just doodling. But a man nearby, older with weather-beaten cheeks and a patient gaze, leans in now and then to offer correction or nod approval. And here's your quirky tidbit. While there's no surviving written Hawaiian alphabet before contact with the West, scholars believe fish pond knowledge was sometimes passed down through symbolic maps and chant a blend of visual memory and oral tradition. These leaf sketches may be practice, maybe prophecy. One teen shows you her drawing a perfect spiral traced again and again in different colors. It's the water, she explains, always turning, never stopping. You nod. You get it. Behind you, a wooden gong sounds once deep and hollow. Not an alarm, a cue. People begin drifting toward a large wooden platform near the main pond. You follow. The platform is shaded with woven palm fronds, its posts carved with petroglyphs you don't recognize but instinctively respect. Everyone settles without instruction, elders on one side, children in the laps of parents, everyone else cross-legged or reclining. A hush falls, broken only by the rhythmic lap of water. Then an elder steps forward, his feet bare and slow. He holds no staff, wears no crown, just a cloak of faded tapa cloth and a quiet smile. He begins to speak, not loudly, not in ceremony, but in something softer. A tale, perhaps, or a lesson. You don't understand every word, but you follow the shape of it, the movement of fish, through water, of people, through time, of stories, through breath. Historians still argue whether gatherings like these, part instruction, part storytelling, functioned as formal education or simply cultural glue. Either way, they held a community together in ways a chalkboard never could. The elder gestures toward the pond, then toward the children, and finally toward the sky. His hand lingers there for a moment, then lowers again. He says one more word. Everyone repeats it. Then the platform empties, quietly, as if something sacred just happened and no one wants to disturb its shape. You linger, then rise. By now, the shadows have shifted, growing longer and more textured. The pond takes on a darker sheen, and the wind carries a sharper scent. Damp leaves, earth, the first hint of seaweed on a receding tide. Someone hands you a bowl. You accept it without question. Inside, steamed fish wrapped in Thai leaf sticky rice and a bright yellow fruit you don't recognize but instinctively bite into. Sweet, sharp, perfect. You sit beneath a tree whose roots look like sleeping animals and eat in peace. Across the pond, a pair of dogs playfully chase each other through the brush, stirring up birds and bits of laughter from the workers nearby. Someone strums a nose flute. Someone else snores beneath a wide-brimmed hat. You lean back against the tree. The day is slowing, but the work isn't done. The air is thick with that golden late-afternoon glow, the kind that softens the lines between everything between sky and land, between what's happening and what's being remembered. You stretch again, bellyful, eyelids heavier than you'd admit. But then you catch the sound of splashing not from play, this time, but from purpose. You rouse yourself following the sound back toward the main pond. A group of fishers, some older, some not yet old enough to shave, are working together in silent coordination. They're guiding fish toward a wooden sluice gate using woven palm frond barriers shaped like gentle funnels. A rhythmic dance back and forth, always waist-deep. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Hawaiian fish ponds, or loco-ie, were among the most advanced forms of aquaculture in the Pacific. These weren't just holes in the ground, they were engineered ecosystems with sluice gates, makaha, that regulated tidal flow, allowed small fish in, and kept larger ones from escaping. The gates in front of you creak as they're adjusted. The fishers step aside and the water begins to shift direction. Not a wave, not a whirlpool, more like a deliberate breath exhaled by the ocean itself. You watch as dozens of silvery fish glide through the narrowing gap, some resisting, some surrendering. You lean in closer and see how the gates are built, not from nails or hinges, but from lashed sticks and lava stones fitted together like an intricate puzzle. No metal, no screws, just cleverness and memory. The kind of knowledge passed from fingertip to fingertip over generations. Your eyes drift to the shoreline where an elderly woman sits beside an open basket methodically sorting small pebbles. You almost overlook her until she lifts one, licks her thumb, and places it carefully at the gate's base. Curious, you approach. She smiles but says nothing, handing you a tiny reddish stone. For weight, someone whispers behind you. To balance the current, you add it to the pile she's making. It looks like nothing, just a clump of rocks. But the sluice gate shifts ever so slightly. The flow evens out. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some keepers claimed they could sense the health of a pond just by how the gate sounded when the tide passed through, whether the water sighed or resisted. They'd adjust pebbles and weights like musicians tuning a quiet stringed instrument. You look back at the woman. She's humming a tune without a name. Then you hear a laugh, a real one, sharp and sudden, cutting through the humid air like a gull's cry. Two boys have jumped into the deeper water behind the gate. One of them is pretending to be a fish, darting and flipping. The other chases him with a makeshift net woven from coconut fronds. Out someone calls, laughing too. You'll scare the real ones. They scramble back out, dripping and grinning. One tosses a fish-shaped leaf at the other like it's a joke only they understand. You get the sense this moment has played out here 1,000 times before. Nearby, a father is showing his young daughter how to check the net for damage. She's serious about it, brow furrowed like a royal cartographer. Her fingers trace the thin weave with care, and when she finds a tear, she lifts her face proudly. He nods and kisses her forehead. Historians still argue whether this level of pond maintenance required a formal hierarchy or whether it was just embedded in daily life. What's clear is that everyone had a part: children, elders, dreamers, and skeptics. The pond was the village, and the village was the pond. The gate creaks again. One final surge of water rushes through, bringing a few more fish. Then it's closed for the night. Not locked, just held. The tide rests. So does the pond. Someone taps your shoulder. You turn. Help us carry, they say. You nod. Soon, you're walking back up the shore, balancing a shallow basket between you and a young man with calloused palms. Inside the evening's catch. Nothing massive, nothing greedy. Enough. Always enough. You pass more families now returning from their own corners of the pond, their baskets swinging, gently, voices low and satisfied. The sun kisses the horizon. Birds circle low. Even the dogs from earlier now follow more slowly, content to stay near the smell of food. You reach the storage hut where the catch is laid out on woven mats. A woman tallies them, not with numbers but with pebbles and sticks placed in deliberate patterns beside each pile. No abacus. No scales, just knowing. You watch as a few fish are placed in smaller baskets marked with red fibers. For the kapuna, someone says the elders, the ancestors. A gift returned. One fish is wrapped alone with a piece of taro root beside it. It's placed gently at the edge of a stone altar, overlooking the sea. No words, just thanks. You're still barefoot as you follow the others along the path that curls inland. The stones beneath your feet are warm from the day's sun, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. You carry nothing. Now your hands are free, your stomach quietly satisfied, and your head pleasantly cloudy, as if someone has turned down the brightness of the world just a notch. The path is shaded now by clusters of hala trees, their long spiky leaves rustling with the breeze. It's not jungle, not quite, but it feels wild enough that the boundary between human space and natural world is more of a handshake than a fence. A rooster crows somewhere, not because he has to, but because he feels like it. Up ahead is a low structure made of lava rock and thatch slightly sunken into the earth. It doesn't look like much. A hut maybe, but as you approach, the chatter around you quiets. People are removing flower garlands from their necks, setting them gently onto a carved wooden table near the entrance. No one explains it. They don't have to. You mimic the motion, removing a single flower tucked behind your ear, laying it with the others. Here's your mainstream historical fact: in early Hawaiian culture, spirituality and agriculture were deeply entwined. Fish ponds weren't just food sources, they were sacred spaces connected to the gods of fertility, ocean, and ancestors. Offerings were common, especially after a bountiful catch or before a season of repair. You step inside. The air is cooler here, and the scent of fresh herbs and damp stone wraps around you like a damp shawl. A fire burns low in a recessed pit, more for spirit than for heat. Around the edges of the hut, bundles of tie, leaves, feathers, and fish bones hang from the beams like wind chimes designed by memory. In the center, an elderly man kneels. He's quiet, his eyes closed. He doesn't speak, but after a moment, he gestures to the floor. You sit cross-legged. Others join. No ceremony, just presence. He begins to chant. Not loudly, not with drama, just a steady melodic flow of words older than any paper map. His voice rises and falls like a tide. It doesn't demand attention, but it gathers it all the same. You close your eyes, and here's your quirky tidbit. Some Hawaiian chants used during agricultural rituals were said to include sounds mimicking fish or ocean swells on purpose. The belief was that if you could sing the pond's song back to it, the fish would feel welcomed. Some even believed the pond could feel gratitude. You're not sure what this chant means. No one translates, and that's okay. Because even in your stillness, your thoughts drift back to the splashing boys, the stone-laying woman, the swaying nets in the water. Everything feels connected, not just in idea, but in rhythm. It's as if this moment isn't happening now, but always part of the repeating loop of waterfish hands and stories. The chant ends. The man opens his eyes slowly. He doesn't smile, doesn't nod. He just looks around the circle as if counting souls, making sure everyone's spirit came back in one piece. Then, with a whisper of motion, everyone begins to rise. You follow. Outside, the sky has gone lavender. The stars have started their quiet blinking. One of the women beside you points and says something in Hawaiian. A name. You recognize it, Hoku, the word for star. Historians still argue whether these rituals were standardized or unique to each pond and family. Some anthropologists claim the chants followed strict protocol. Others argue they were more fluid, passed orally, with changes added like spices to stew. What's likely is that it depended on who was doing the remembering and who was listening. The group disperses. Some head toward the sleeping huts. Others linger. You find yourself walking slowly back toward the pond edge, drawn by that moonlight mirror. The tide has shifted again. You hear it in the lapping water, in the way the grass leans back just slightly toward the shore. Then you see her. A girl no more than 9 or 10 standing ankle-deep in the pond. She's holding something. A fish maybe, but no, it's smoother. A carved piece of wood. She sets it gently into the water. It floats for a moment, then tips, sinks, vanishes. A wish, a message. You don't ask. She looks up and sees you, smiles, then turns and walks back toward the village. You sit again at the water's edge. You can still smell the incense from the hut, still feel the warm press of stone beneath your heels. The stars are brighter now. You imagine someone miles away on another island, looking at the same night and thinking a similar thought, that the pond is more than a pond, that the fish are more than food, that the moon is more than a moon. It's a reminder. You let your fingers trail in the water, and the pond breathes back. The water laps gently around your fingers, cool but not cold, like it knows you now. The moon hangs above the pond like a sleeping eye, casting reflections that shimmer and vanish with each ripple. You're not the only one who's come back to this edge. Across the stone wall, someone hums softly the melody too loose to follow, like the tail end of a dream. You're about to rise when you hear the slap of bare feet on stone. A group of teenagers, 3 boys, maybe a girl, it's hard to tell in the dark, appear with fishing nets bundled in their arms. They're laughing quietly, not bothering to whisper. One of them tosses a net into the pond with a practiced flick. Another wades in and disappears behind a low curve in the wall. And here's your mainstream historical fact: Hawaiian fish ponds weren't just daytime operations. Night fishing, especially during certain moon phases, was part of the aquaculture rhythm. Fish were often more active under moonlight, and the silvery reflection helped illuminate movements in the water without spooking the prey. One of the teens spots you and waves. It's not a greeting, it's an invitation. You join them at the shallows. The youngest hands you a woven basket made from lauhala leaves, still damp and smelling of sap. Just hold, he says. Don't chase. You nod, basket in hand, and step into the water. It hugs your ankles like a soft rope. Around you, nets glide silently, flicking over the surface like wings. Someone tosses a stone into the water, and fish scatter, darting toward the trap channels built into the walls. Ingenious engineering that works with instinct, not against it. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some traditions, fish pond workers believed that whistling scared away fish, but singing, especially songs with soft vowel sounds, calmed them. So a quiet tune hummed in harmony with the pond's natural sounds wasn't just entertainment, it was strategy. The boy beside you begins to hum, just 2 notes repeated again and again as if reminding the pond they're friends. You mimic him softly. It feels silly at first until it doesn't. A flash, a splash, then wait in your basket. A fish not large but silvery and strong. It thrashes once then stills. You did it. No one cheers, no one claps, but there's a shared smile and that's more than enough. The girl, yes, definitely a girl, nods toward the sluice gate. Let's walk it back. You follow them to the far end of the pond, where a low wooden gate controls the water's flow. It creaks slightly as one of the teens lifts it, letting a stream pour into a second smaller pool, lined with fine netting. It's where the night's catch will be kept until morning. You tip your fish in gently. It vanishes with a flick of tail. Historians still argue whether these night practices were ceremonial or merely practical. Some say the timing was aligned with lunar calendars and fishing kapu's sacred restrictions set by priests or chiefs. Others argue it was just local wisdom passed down from one muddy foot to the next. Either way, it worked. The gate closes. Nets are coiled. The basket is rinsed in the water and returned to the girl's hip. You all sit on the stone wall for a while, bare feet dangling above the water, cooling and aching in the best way. Someone pulls a sweet potato from a woven pouch, splits it in half with their hands, and passes it around. You bite into it, soft, warm, a little smoky. It tastes like effort and kindness. Moon's high, one boy says. We'll sleep late tomorrow. You nod, already half dreaming. The group disperses again, drifting back toward village paths. You linger one last moment watching the smaller pool where your fish now swims with a few others. Not caught, not quite captive, just relocated, sheltered. You reach down and run your fingers through the water one last time, then rise and make your way along the edge. Somewhere in the distance, drums begin low, slow, like the heartbeat of the island itself. You leave the night fishers behind the hush of water, still clinging to your thoughts like mist. The trail back toward the inland path is barely a foot wide, lined with tall grasses swaying like a sleepy audience. The drums grow louder, though never fast, just a rhythm steady and old pulsing from deeper in the trees. You follow. Not every night in early Hawaii ends with silence. Sometimes the quiet is broken by a different kind of ritual, one meant not for the fish, but for the people who fed them. Tonight is such a night. You come to a clearing lit not by torches or fire pits, but by the moon, and a ring of kukui oil lamps, low flickering flames casting long shadows of the people seated around them. They're gathered in a loose circle, some cross-legged on mats, others reclining against woven baskets or leaning elbows on knees. One elder sits in the center, her eyes closed, lips moving slightly like she's reciting something from memory. And here's your mainstream historical fact storytelling. Ormolelo was one of the most important pillars of Hawaiian life. It wasn't just entertainment. It was education, genealogy, spirituality, and survival. History was carried not in books, but in breath. You settle in at the edge of the group unnoticed, or perhaps simply welcomed without fanfare. The elder opens her eyes now and gestures toward the fire. A younger man steps forward holding a carved calabash bowl. Inside, a blend of taro coconut and crushed breadfruit, thick and fragrant. He ladles out small portions, passing them around. The elder begins to speak. Her voice is slow, measured, each word allowed to ripple through the circle like a stone in a pond. She tells of a fish pond, not this one but another, built long ago by a chief who had no sons, only dreams. In her version, the pond was not dug but sung into existence. Each stone lifted by verse, each wall set in place by rhyme and chant. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some fish ponds, building chants called oli kupala were sung during construction. These chants weren't for show. They were believed to imbue the walls and water with mana or spiritual energy. The more harmoniously the chant was performed, the stronger the pond. The elder's story meanders the way stories do when they're not rushing toward an end. She speaks of talking eels' walls that repair themselves overnight and fish that only appear when certain flowers bloom along the shore. Every so often, someone chuckles or sighs softly in recognition like she's told this one before, but it never grows old. You glance around. The listeners are entranced, not frozen but softened. The circle breathes as one. A baby sleeps in its mother's lap. A boy toys with a smooth stone. Someone sneezes, and the elder pauses just long enough for the echo to fade. The drums haven't stopped. They're not loud, just present, like the tide-like breath. Historians still argue whether these storytelling nights were strictly religious or more social. Some see them as informal education sessions, others as deeply spiritual rites. The truth, you suspect, is both and neither. A thing doesn't need a name to be real. The elder finishes, not with a dramatic flourish, but with a whisper that falls like a final drop into still water. Silence holds for a moment, then releases in a sigh of rustling mats and shifting bodies. Someone passes you a gourd of water. You drink, and it tastes faintly of bamboo and smoke. The night is deep now. You realize you're not tired, but not fully awake either. Like the fish pond you're in, that in-between state between sea and land dream and waking memory and myth. The group begins to disperse in twos and threes, vanishing into the shadows like bits of song caught on the wind. The elder remains, eyes closed again, face tilted toward the stars. You rise quietly and step away from the circle back into the tall grass. The drums fade, but their rhythm lingers in your chest like your own heartbeat has learned the tempo. You walk slowly back toward the pond, back toward sleep. The path that leads you back to the pond is dim now, silvered by moonlight, and softened by the distant hush of waves. The land feels quieter, like something sacred has just passed through, and the island is holding its breath in reverence. You step between two hala trees, their long leaves rattling softly like whispers meant only for the wind. Ahead, the fish pond reemerges still dark and luminous. The tide is low, revealing the curving line of the quappa, that stone wall, built with hands and chants. A wall that breathes, lets in water, and keeps out greed. But you're not heading back to the same side. Tonight, you're drawn to the makaha, the wooden sluice gates that control the pond's flow. These gates are more than barriers. They're thresholds carefully placed between the known and the wild. And on nights like this, they creak, just a little, just enough to sound alive. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Makaha gates were built to allow juvenile fish from the sea to enter the pond freely where they'd grow fat and protected. But once they reached a certain size, the slats of the gate were too narrow for them to escape. Ingenious, sustainable, and deeply attuned to seasonal rhythms. You crouch beside one of the gates. The water trickles through the slats, whispering stories of the reef, the deep, and the moon. A small fish darts past a shadow with fins and vanishes under the lily pads. You feel no need to catch it. Just being near the makaha is enough. The structure itself is simple wooden poles bound with rope angled just right to resist the push of tides. Some were made of ohia, others from driftwood, gifted by the sea. All is lashed with cordage made from olona or coconut fiber materials that breathe, swell, and tighten with water sealing stronger over time. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Some ancient fish pond builders believed the makaha needed to be fed occasionally, not with fish or food, but with fresh kukwai oil rubbed into the joints, or even a whispered chant asking the sea for balance. These rituals weren't superstition, they were maintenance done with love. You sit and listen, letting the sound of trickling water draw you into a kind of reverie. The makaha seems to pulse with time itself. It doesn't just control water, it measures patience. The fish pond isn't a trap, it's a negotiation, a conversation between ocean and land predator and prey, need and restraint. Historians still argue whether makaha design was strictly functional or symbolic. Was it simply an economic tool or a spiritual boundary as well? The truth likely lived somewhere between tide and timber, something you can feel more than prove. You run your fingers over the wood, smooth from years of tide and touch. You imagine the hands that built it, brown, calloused, knowing, not engineers with blueprints, but artisans of the tides. Behind you, the breeze shifts. A cool breath from the sea rolls across your shoulders. You pull your wrap tighter, but it's not a chill you mind. It's a reminder that the sea, though distant now, is always listening, always inching forward, pressing its salt against the shore like a lover who never quite leaves. You stand and gaze across the pond, its stillness broken only by the soft slap of a fishtail. On the far bank, a single torch flickers to life, held by a boy, walking the edge, checking the wall, like his father taught him. He doesn't wave, doesn't speak, just nods once and continues on. You nod back. The makaha creaks again, and somewhere beneath your feet, the tides turn. You rise from your crouch by the makaha and begin to follow the pond's curve, your bare feet pressing soft imprints into the earth. The path is uneven in places, but worn by centuries of quiet footfall. You pass a small stone altar nestled near the edge, half swallowed by ferns and night. It's not marked by plaque or sign, but the polished surface and offerings of smooth pebble shells and a small braid of ti leaves speak for themselves. This isn't just a food system, it's a living temple. You sit again this time on a rounded lava rock with a patch of moss as soft as woven kapa. Across the water, the torchlight from the boys' patrol flickers once more, then disappears behind a stand of ho trees. Everything here is moving, but gently, like the breath of the land hasn't changed in 1,000 years. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Hawaiian fish ponds, or loko-ia, were considered sacred and integral parts of the Ahupuaia system, a land division running from mountain to sea. Every element of the ecosystem was linked, and the pond's health was seen as a reflection of the entire community's well-being. This wasn't agriculture as conquest, it was agriculture as ceremony. You reach out and trail your fingers in the water. It's warmer than you expected, as if the pond remembers the sun even after dark. A school of ama-ama mullet glide past in a silver rush, their tails cutting like ribbons. You're close enough to see their eyes dark and unreadable, like they've always known more than you. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Some ponds had guardian eels or puhi who were said to recognize particular keepers and even react to their voices. Whether trained or simply used to being fed scraps, these eels were treated as gatekeepers, half pet, half god. You pause, watching the reeds for movement. Who knows, one might be watching you now. A soft rustle stirs the nearby bushes, just the wind, or something older. You think back to the alii, the chiefs who once walked this same path. They didn't just own these ponds, they honored them. A well-kept pond reflected a chief's wisdom and restraint. Greedy harvesting led to cloudy water, fewer fish, and whispers of imbalance. But a pond left to breathe to rest was a sign of leadership that understood more than warfare. Historians still argue whether fish pond management was more practical or spiritual in daily life. Some claim rituals were merely performative, others insist they shaped the land's behavior, but maybe those scholars just haven't sat here long enough listening to the water. A breeze slips through again, this time carrying the soft scent of pua kenikeni. You close your eyes. In the distance, someone is singing a slow, wordless chant, a lullaby, a prayer. It floats across the pond like mist settling into the shallow places between memory and sleep. You lean back onto your elbows, let your body sink into the night, and imagine what it was like when the whole island whispered like this. No headlights, no concrete, just stars, tides, voices, and time. You wonder if the fish dream, if they remember old chants spoken just above the waterline, if they pause when the moon passes overhead. A pair of night herons stalk the far edge of the pond, stepping like thieves in the torchlight. Their heads tilt, feathers ruffle, then splash. One dives, comes up empty. The other waits still as a carved idol. Hunting takes patience here, whether bird or man. And now you understand what the pond has been teaching you all night. This place doesn't reward force. It rewards presence. Your breath slows in rhythm with the water lapping gently at the stone wall beside you. From somewhere deeper in the reeds, a frog chirps, then another. The nighttime chorus builds not with urgency, but with layers like a lullaby composed by the island itself. You shift on the rock and spot something curious across the pond, a small figure wading into the water, their silhouette framed by moonlight. They move with the calm confidence of someone who's done this before, maybe a young apprentice sent to scatter pe'akai sea salt into the water as an offering. Maybe they're just checking nets, but the care in their posture tells you this is more than a chore. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Early Hawaiians didn't view the pond as just a fishing ground. It was a site of reciprocal care. Daily maintenance wasn't optional. Algae had to be managed, invasive species watched, and the balance between freshwater and seawater constantly adjusted through the makaha. You can imagine the routine now, early risers skimming the surface with woven scoops, clearing debris while humming softly. Others standing at the sluice gate waiting for the tide to shift just enough to let fresh water flow in without inviting hungry predators. And then there's tonight's caretaker, still ankle deep and unmoving, as if consulting the pond itself for permission to proceed. Now, your quirky tidbit. Some families believe that certain ponds had moods. If you entered on a day the pond felt off, too murky, too still, too noisy, it was best to leave it alone. Some even whispered that ponds could fall asleep, or worse, sulk if treated with disrespect. The solution: gentle singing, or an offering of fermented taro mash wrapped in leaves. Historians still argue whether these stories were metaphors for seasonal cycles or real belief systems shaped by close ecological observation. But as the wind picks up and the caretaker finally steps away from the pond's edge, you start to think maybe the pond really does hold a grudge or a grinning memory. You stretch again, and this time lie fully back on the ground, feeling the coarse grass under your neck and the vast sky pressing gently on your chest. The stars have sharpened since earlier. Orion is overhead, and next to him, a trail of smaller lights curves toward the ocean. It feels right somehow that the cosmos should mirror the curve of the fish pond. Your mind drifts to the Ali Kahu, the stewards assigned to care for these sacred bodies of water. Not kings, not laborers, something in between. They were like librarians of the tide, entrusted with the codes of when to feed, when to harvest, when to wait. Imagine carrying 100 generations of instinct and instruction in your bones. No manuals, no apps. Just the sky, the seasons, the weight of a basket of mullet telling you what kind of year it's going to be. A nearby branch creaks as an owl lands above you, silent except for the soft rustle of feathers. You stare up at it, and for a moment it stares back. There's a gravity to that look, as if the bird is sizing you up not as predator or prey, but as someone who hasn't yet earned a place here. You nod, just a little. The owl blinks and looks away. In the pond, another ripple spreads wider this time. Maybe a fish surfacing, maybe something else. You close your eyes and listen not just to the frogs and wind and owl, but to the deep hum beneath it all. The pulse of an island built not just on lava, but on Story's breath and brackish water. Tomorrow the tide will shift, the nets will be checked, the sea will call to the pond like it always has. But tonight it all just floats. The breeze carries the scent of limu seaweed, faint but unmistakable, mingling with the earthy smell of whetstone and wood. You're still lying on your back, half listening to the night, when you hear the soft tread of footsteps on the nearby embankment. Not hurried, not sneaking, just someone walking like they belong here. You sit up, slightly careful not to startle the moment. A man in a loose kapa cloak steps into view. He's older, with a face mapped by sunlight and salt. He doesn't speak. He simply nods once, as if he's known you would be here all along. Then he sets down a basket made of woven ti leaves and crouches beside the pond. The basket isn't filled with tools. It holds rocks, each one flat and smoothed by time. With practiced fingers, he begins to place them one by one at the pond's edge, not randomly, deliberately, forming what looks like a spiral that curls into the water like a question. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Early Hawaiian fish ponds were more than agricultural infrastructure, they were spiritual landscapes. Stones placed at certain points weren't just for erosion control or marking ownership. They were sometimes meant to appease lizard-like water spirits believed to inhabit deep ponds and springs. The older man continues his quiet work. You want to ask what he's doing, but it feels like a question that would evaporate before reaching his ears. So you stay still, watching the spiral take shape. Now your quirky tidbit. It's said that if a mo was angered by careless fishing, broken taboos, or even loud laughter near sacred waters, it could withhold fish entirely. Nets would come up empty, days would stretch long and hungry. The solution wasn't punishment, it was apology. Rituals chance a return to silence, sometimes even just letting the pond rest for a full moon. Historians still argue whether these stories were invented to enforce ecological stewardship or reflect genuine animistic beliefs passed down from Polynesian voyaging ancestors. Either way, the result was the same respect. The man finishes placing his stones, then sits back, legs crossed, hands resting on his knees. He closes his eyes not in sleep, but in reverence. You do the same, and for a moment, you are both simply part of the scene. You wonder how many times this act has been repeated, how many generations before you placed stones just like these whispered thanks to unseen watchers and trusted the pond to feed them in return. A warm silence settles over the water. The frogs have gone quiet. Even the owl has moved on. It's easy to forget in a world of blinking screens and buzzing clocks that silence can be an offering, that stillness can be a form of action. And as you sit beside the pond, heart slowed to match its rhythm, you begin to feel what those old ali'ikahu must have felt, the hum beneath the world, the patience of tides, the gravity of tending something that cannot speak but never forgets. A small splash breaks the surface. You glance over, a fish maybe, or a final ripple of approval from the mo'o. Either way, you smile. It's getting late, or early. The first gray light is starting to creep across the water, softening the edges of everything. The older man stands, collects his basket, and disappears back along the path, leaving only the spiral behind. And as the pond begins to glow with the slow amber blush of dawn, you feel ready to rise. Not because anything is finished, but because something old and quiet has been shared. Tomorrow the fishing might begin, or the weeding, or another layer of stone laid down by hand. But tonight, just for now, you were a listener, and the pond has heard you too. The day rises gently without a jolt. You're still there by the pond, stretching your limbs and blinking into the haze of early sun. The water is gold now, softly lit, nearly still, and you realize you've never quite watched it wake up before. It doesn't sparkle or stir all at once. It hums, it breathes, it remembers. You stand slowly and wander toward a nearby structure, low, rectangular, roofed with thatch and open at the sides. It's a hale lawaya, a fisherman's house. There's a canoe pulled partway onto the grass beside it, its long hull weathered by salt and time. Tools hang on the wall nets woven from Olona fiber floats made of gourds, and kukoi nut lanterns, their oil-smudged wicks coiled and ready. Inside the hale, two younger fishers are seated, one threading cord through a bundle of netting, while the other shapes a sliver of wood into a hook with the curve of a crescent moon. They don't speak much, but the silence isn't awkward, it's practiced, comfortable, like the pause between tides. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Hawaiian fishers were known for their specialized tools crafted with astonishing precision. Hooks were shaped from bone, shell, or wood, each design suited to a specific fish species or behavior. The methods weren't just practical, they were passed down through chant memory and repetition. You sit nearby, observing. They're not just making gear, they're preparing to ask the ocean a question. The question, will you feed us today? The answer depends on more than luck. It depends on skill, on knowledge, and sometimes on poetry. Now your quirky tidbit. Some fishing chants Oli Lawaya weren't just sung before a journey, but whispered directly into the bait or the hook itself. It was believed the words might charm the fish, or perhaps convince them that swimming near the canoe was their destiny. Historians still argue whether these rituals served spiritual purposes or operated as mnemonic devices, ways to encode environmental knowledge through rhythm and rhyme. Either way, they helped fishers remember the currents, the seasons, the signs of the sea. The younger fisher finishes his hook and holds it up to the light. He doesn't smile, but his eyes flash with a quiet satisfaction. He places it into a carved box lined with soft tapa cloth and covers it like it's something sacred. And maybe it is. Another man enters, older and weather-beaten. He nods at the boys, glances at you, then lifts a narrow gourd to his lips and pours water over his hands, an act of cleansing before touching the canoe. He dips the gourd into a stone basin again and offers it to you. The water tastes like rock and sun and something older than words. It's almost time. The nets are coiled, the hooks are chosen, and the canoe has been caressed with kukui oil, but they don't rush. Nothing here is rushed. The sea won't arrive sooner if you panic. The tide won't shift because you raise your voice. Instead, the men sit for a moment, more eyes half closed, palms resting on their knees. And in that stillness, you hear it again, not a sound exactly, but a reminder. Fishing here is not just survival. It's stewardship. It's ceremony. It's the art of asking, not taking. You rise as they do, stepping back as the canoe is lifted with practiced grace and slid into the water's edge. Today may be a good catch. Or not. But already something has been gathered. A thread pulled tight through time, connecting you to hands that have done this for centuries. Hands that have never needed a clock to know when it's time to listen. You walk the shore again, this time behind the departing canoe. It slices through the shallows like a whisper, leaving only the faintest ripples behind. You stay on land. Your place isn't in the boat today, but your feet follow its path, tracing the rhythms of shoreline life. A little further down, nestled under a crooked hollow tree, you spot an older woman arranging bundles of dried seaweed into tight braids. She's working with limu algae, prized not just for food, but for medicine and sacred rites. Her fingers move quickly with more instinct than thought, as if the braids have always known how to twist themselves. She looks up and smiles. Doesn't say anything, just hands you a strand to smell. It's ocean sharp and oddly sweet, like sea air mixed with citrus and iron. You hold it close and breathe deep. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Early Hawaiians cultivated and harvested over 60 varieties of edible seaweed, or limu, integrating them into diets, rituals, and even birth customs. Limu wasn't garnish, it was life. Nearby, children play in a tide pool, chasing tiny shrimp between the rocks. One scoops up a hermit crab and gasps with delight when it retracts into its shell. Another holds a piece of broken coral to the sun, watching light refract into hidden rainbows. You sit beside them for a moment, knees hugged to your chest. Everything here is soft sand-wind laughter. Even the colors seem kinder. Nothing neon. Just rust-red rocks, mossy greens, and the warm brown of worn driftwood. The woman begins singing softly, a repetitive tune you can't quite follow. The limu braids rest in her lap like snakes asleep. Her voice carries the melody upward past the tree branches, where a mina bird listens without comment. Here comes your quirky tidbit. Some Hawaiian elders believed seaweed could hear your intentions. If you approached limu harvest with gratitude and restraint, the sea would grant abundance. But if you grabbed without asking, without acknowledging, you'd return with empty hands. Historians still argue whether this was folklore or a coded form of sustainable resource management. Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe it was just the way people learned to live with an ocean that remembers everything. The kids dart away, their attention already shifting to something shinier. But the woman stays. She pulls out a small gourd and pours a milky liquid onto the sand. Not much, just a mouthful, an offering. For the ones before she murmurs. You say nothing, but the quiet feels like a reply. As the tide begins its slow return, the sea laps gently at your ankles. The woman offers you a braid of limu tied with a loop of coconut fiber. You accept it with both hands because that's the rule, even when you're not sure why. She nods satisfied, then goes back to her work. You rise, once again reminded that this place doesn't need signs or fences to protect its secrets. It trusts the sea, and the sea, for now, trusts them back. You carry the limu braid with you, letting it dangle from your fingers like a charm or a question. The wind picks up slightly warm and salt damp, and the sound of the tide deepens into a low, rolling hush. You follow it inland toward the mouth of a stream that feeds one of the older fish ponds, the kind locals call loko wai, freshwater, fed from the mountains. Here, the landscape softens even more. The rush of ocean gives way to birdsong, rustling banana leaves, and the occasional croak of a frog. You cross a narrow footbridge made of lashed bamboo, and your bare feet feel each notch, each seam, every step, a reminder that you're walking on something built by hands, not machines. The stream itself is glassy and slow, filled with little darting fish, no longer than your thumb. A man squats at its edge, sorting stones with surprising care. He's building a miniature dam not to stop the water, but to guide it a gentle redirection like cupping rain in your palm without trapping it. Mainstream historical fact time, the ingenuity of ancient Hawaiian aquaculture extended far beyond the ponds themselves. They engineered elaborate irrigation systems that funneled both fresh and brackish water through controlled inlets, balancing salinity for specific fish species. The system didn't just sustain it refined. The man gestures for you to help. You crouch beside him, placing stones as he points. Some flat, some round, all with a purpose. It's less like construction, more like solving a puzzle where the pieces keep moving. After a while, he stands and stretches. His shirt is loose hand-woven. His calves are strong from years of squatting in streams. Without speaking, he takes a few pebbles from a pouch and tosses them upstream. They plink against the current, vanishing quickly. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. It's for the spirits, he says, or the water. Same difference. You smile. That's your quirky tidbit. In some families, especially those with generational ties to pond keeping, it was common to feed the stream with stones or flower petals, small tokens to honor the invisible stewards of the flow. Historians still argue whether these gestures originated from animist belief systems or practical rituals meant to encode respect into daily habit. But they agree on one thing: this behavior kept people attentive, and attention, more than anything, protects a fragile system. The man wades into the stream to adjust something deeper. You stay behind, watching the tiny whirlpools swirl where rocks meet current. A dragonfly skims the surface. A water strider casts a thread-like shadow on the ripples. Suddenly, you feel the pull of the pond again, like it's calling you back through the trees. You rise, brush your palms on your legs, and glance over your shoulder. The man is gone, or maybe just crouched so low you can't see him. The limu braid swings gently from your hand. Still damp, still alive. You walk back the way you came, past ferns and fallen fruit, toward the curving stone wall of the fish pond where everything began, and somewhere upstream, you hear the unmistakable sound of a gourd drum echoing against water. You follow the beat of the gourd drum as if it were a compass, pulling you back through the jungle fringe, across the bamboo bridge, and into the salt-sweet embrace of the pond's edge. There, the world feels balanced again, sun to your back, water ahead, and earth humming gently beneath your feet. Tonight the pond isn't quiet, it sings. Or, rather, the people gathered around it do. A ring of locals, old young somewhere in between, sit on woven mats that form a circle along the northern wall. Torches flicker in the sand, casting their light sideways and golden. You hesitate at the edge, but a woman in a bright teal kapa cloth gestures you forward. You step into the circle. No one stops you. Someone hands you a bowl. Not fish this time, but poi, smooth and purple and cool to the touch. You take a bite. It's earthy and subtle, and somehow exactly what your body needs. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The gathering you're witnessing reflects a traditional ho'okupu, a form of offering or communal sharing tied to celebration, reciprocity, and the recognition of nature's gifts. These events often included music chants, storytelling, and food exchanges, all centered around the communal guardianship of resources like fish ponds. There's a chant rising now. Not sharp or commanding, but low and melodic, like breath layered on itself. The words repeat round and round until the rhythm takes on a current of its own. You don't understand the language, not exactly, but you feel the intention in your bones. It speaks of tides and harvests, of balance and timing, of the quiet power of care. Quirky tidbit time: during some ho'okupu, guests would bring symbolic gifts like a stone from their home stream or the first fish of their morning catch, each wrapped in leaves and tied with plant fiber. These weren't presents for people, they were offerings for the kupua, the guardian spirits believed to dwell in places of abundance. You look around and spot a boy no older than 10, gently placing a small bundle wrapped in tie leaf at the base of the pond wall. He bows his head briefly, then runs off laughing with another child. It's not somber, it's playful, reverent in the way kids understand without being told. The drumming shifts, slower now. The circle leans in as an elder begins to speak. His voice is gravel wrapped in velvet. He tells the story of the first fish pond not as history, but as genealogy. The pond was not built, he says it was born. It was the child of water and stone, of reef and current. Its walls were not barriers, but arms cradling life. Historians still argue whether the origin stories told in chants and oral traditions are literal records or metaphorical blueprints, but the wisdom they carry about balanced kinship and stewardship is undeniable. The elder finishes. A woman hums a lullaby you almost recognize. Someone taps out a new rhythm on the edge of a calabash bowl. You breathe deeply. You feel the salt on your lips, the poi on your tongue, and the slight buzz in your chest that only comes from being exactly where you're meant to be, even if just for a moment. You let your gaze wander to the pond again. The water glows in the torchlight, ringed by shadow, alive with unseen movement. And somewhere out there, beneath the surface, fish glide quietly between moonlight and memory. The lull of the evening deepens like tidewater slipping further from shore. Conversations drop to murmurs. Some people stretch out on mats. Others tuck their legs under themselves and rest their chins on their hands, eyes half-lidded as they watch the fire crackle. Even the fish pond seems quieter, the occasional ripple breaking the surface like a gentle sigh. You feel your limbs grow heavy in that satisfying way that means your body trusts the space it's in. It's not just the food or the salt air or the flickering firelight. It's the ritual of it all. The practiced ease of a community that spent generations tuning itself to the rhythms of land and water. You glance to your left and catch a group of older men passing around a simple bamboo flute. One plays a few notes soft rising, and the others nod. Another responds with a different tune, this one spiraling and playful. It's not performance. It's a kind of gentle conversation through music. Your host from earlier, the man who guided you down the lava path, is back. He sits cross-legged near you, a soft smile in his beard. He hands you a small stone, smooth black, still warm from the fire pit. He says nothing, just watches as you turn it in your hand. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Hawaiian culture recognized land, water, and people as interconnected parts of a living system known as ahupua'a. Within these districts, resources flowed from mountain to sea in carefully regulated cycles. Fish ponds like the one you're sitting beside were often the final stop, fed by streams, cared for by families, and nourished by the wisdom of those who came before. The stone, he finally says, is from Ma'uka the uplands, carried here by hand. It reminds them where the water begins. Now, for your quirky tidbit, some oral traditions say that certain fish ponds could hear, that they would grow more bountiful if sung to regularly, especially at dawn or dusk. Songs weren't just for people, they were part of maintaining the spirit of the place. Your companion leans closer, voice barely a whisper now. You feel it. You nod. You do. There's something about the air here that feels tuned, not just warm or fragrant, but resonant like the inside of a shell held to your ear. He taps the stone once against his palm and places it gently back near the fire, as if returning it to something larger. You lie back and gaze upward. The stars have come out in force, sharp, clear, and impossibly numerous. The kind of sky you almost forget exists if you've spent too many nights under electric lights. Historians still argue whether this kind of star-watching was purely navigational, or if it also played a spiritual role in timing harvest offerings and community gatherings. Truth be told, it was probably both. Hawaiian astronomy was as poetic as it was precise. You trace the arc of the Milky Way with your fingertip. Someone laughs softly nearby. A breeze curls through the coconut palms and tickles your feet. In that moment, everything, the chants, the drums, the moonlit water, the rhythmic hush of waves on black sand, melts into a single slow breath that the island seems to take with you. You close your eyes for a beat, just long enough to imagine what it would feel like to be a part of this cycle, not just for an evening, but for a lifetime. To wake up and fall asleep to the same rhythms year after year, tide after tide. And then, a gentle bell chimes somewhere in the dark. Once, then twice. Not loud, just enough to signal that the evening's final story is about to begin. The bell's resonance fades, but its presence lingers as if the sound has slipped into the night air and decided to stay a while. You sit up slightly, realigning your cushion and pulling the woven blanket closer. Around you, others do the same. No one speaks now. The murmur has hushed. The sea keeps breathing. The stars blink in approval. From the far edge of the circle, a woman rises. She's older hair, silvered, but eyes sharp as obsidian. No fanfare announces her, no spotlight, no introduction, but the subtle shift in posture from everyone around her makes clear this is her moment. She walks slowly toward the center where the fire burns low and a small wooden stool waits. Her long wrap of indigo cloth brushes the earth with every step. As she passes, she nods gently to certain faces, acknowledgments woven through familiarity like threads in a lei. When she settles on the stool, the hush deepens. And then she begins, not with a story, but with a chant oli, as it's called, a deep, undulating melody words that feel carved from stone and salt. You don't recognize the language, but somehow it vibrates in your chest. The fire flickers with her voice casting long shadows across the gathering. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In traditional Hawaiian society, storytellers were revered as knowledge keepers, conduits between past and present. They preserved lineage, law, myth, and environmental wisdom, often blending spoken word with chant and gesture. Their memory was their library, and performance was sacred duty. Her chant morphs gently into speech. A tale begins to form of a boy who forgot how to listen to the wind of a fish, who swam backward into time of a village that moved itself to protect a sleeping god. The story is strange and lovely, its rhythm slow and dreamlike. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Some kahuna expert practitioners, including storytellers, were believed to hold literal memory chants that, if performed incorrectly, could tangle the truth. Thus, many were trained from childhood using rhythmic walking, underwater recitation, or tracing patterns in sand to help embed exact phrasing. These weren't just tales, they were precision instruments. You shift entranced. The fire throws golden shapes on the storyteller's face, painting her in ever-changing light. Her voice bends with the ocean, then cracks like dry lava rock, then warms again with laughter. She pauses at one point, turns her gaze toward the fish pond, and says, "Even the water listens if you speak slow enough." And then she continues weaving her narrative around the listeners like a loose net, gentle, intricate, and full of holes where imagination is meant to swim through. Historians still argue whether these night gatherings were strictly ceremonial or if they served a more democratic purpose, teaching, sharing, correcting memory. But perhaps the truth lies in the fact that no one leaves. No one looks away. You glance around the circle. A teenager rests their head on a grandparent's shoulder. A fisherman's calloused hands curl loosely around a tea gourd. A child lies fully asleep, cradled in her mother's lap, brow furrowed in a dreaming frown. Even the dogs have stopped pacing. And you forget your modern life for a moment. Your phone, your deadlines, your inbox full of things you've been meaning to ignore. None of that fits here. Not between these chants, these sighs, these stars. The woman ends her story without flourish. Just a breath, a closing glance. The bell chimes once more, and everyone exhales as if a collective spell has been lifted. The crowd doesn't erupt. It doesn't applaud. That would be too sharp, too final. Instead, there's a slow return to breathing, to shifting cushions and stretching legs. Some whisper thanks. Others simply nod in the storyteller's direction. She smiles, modest and knowing, and walks quietly back into the circle, like nothing happened, like she didn't just spend time for an entire beach of people. You feel it in your chest, though, that gentle ache of wonder. The story, though finished, doesn't feel over. It clings to the air like dew still seeping into your thoughts. Someone passes you a small piece of coconut wrapped in Thai leaf. No explanation, no ceremony, just nourishment. You thank them with a nod. The coconut is sweet and grounding, and suddenly you remember you haven't eaten in hours. Not that you're hungry exactly, it's a different kind of need, one that settles you. Out by the pond, the fish ripple again, not startled, just existing, in rhythm. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Hawaiian loco ia, or fish ponds, were not only technological marvels, but also spiritual spaces. Every aspect from the lava rock walls to the sluice gates was aligned with both environmental knowledge and cultural belief. Maintenance was a communal act, and usage followed seasonal kapu sacred restrictions that preserved ecological balance. Your gaze drifts toward the horizon where the pond meets the ocean. It's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. That's the point, isn't it? This system, this life, was never meant to be about hard edges. It was about flow. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some areas, children were taught to mimic the feeding patterns of fish using chants and hand games. These rituals helped instill not only knowledge of fish behavior, but a sense of kinship. A child wasn't just learning how to farm, they were learning how to be a good neighbor to the sea. Beside you, someone softly hums a lullaby, a tune so simple it feels older than speech. Now, the scholarly debate, historians still argue whether early Hawaiian aquaculture was primarily a pragmatic survival strategy or a manifestation of cosmic balance. Some frame it as environmental engineering. Others say it was theology made tangible. The truth, probably both. The fire crackles again, lower now. Its embers paint shadows on the inside of your mind. You feel slower, heavier, but in the best possible way, as if the stories and sea air have woven a blanket from the inside out. A breeze rolls through, someone adjusts their cloak. Another reclines all the way back staring at the stars without pretense. The moment isn't over, it's just transforming. From across the circle, a younger voice calls, not loud, just clear enough. Would anyone like to hear a song about the eels? A few chuckles rise. Someone replies, only if it's the long version. Laughter now soft and full-bodied. The storyteller grins, then launches into a chant so playful and rhythmic it feels more like a skipping stone than a story. Her hands move as she sings, mimicking the twisting bodies of eels, the sliding of rocks, the glint of moonlight on wet skin. It's nonsense and wisdom, joke and lesson, history disguised as fun. You listen, and with each verse your thoughts drift further from the edges of your own life. Your inbox. What inbox? That cracked window in your apartment you've been meaning to fix. You don't even remember the shape of it now. All that exists is the pond, the song, the night. Someone nearby leans in and whispers, you'll never see an eel the same way again. And they're right. The eel's song winds down with a sly grin and a final flick of the wrist. The laughter fades not into silence, but into something better, a warm hush of shared contentment. You can feel the rhythm of the chant still ticking in your chest, like a tide that hasn't quite let go. You stretch your legs beneath the blanket of your own stillness, your hands warmed by the earlier coconut, your breath long and steady now. The fire has dwindled to low coals, but nobody seems in a rush to leave. You're not sure you could move, even if you wanted to. You are anchored here as surely as the fish pond stones are anchored in the sea. Your mind drifts to the shape of those ponds, the way the walls curve, not in stiff lines, but in gentle bows. Some say they mimic the arc of a moon or the soft outline of a canoe hull. You remember from earlier that some ponds even had underwater channels designed to guide fish back in if they tried to leave. Not traps guides. There's a difference. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The genius of early Hawaiian aquaculture was not simply in containment, but in guidance. Ponds like Loko Kuapa used stone channels, adjustable gates, and tidal rhythms to entice fish in during high tide and gently keep them through the low. No nets, no cages, just understanding and patience. You smile, imagining a fish approaching the gate like an indecisive dinner guest. In or out, or maybe just hover here and enjoy the view. And your quirky tidbit. Some pond tenders swore that speaking kindly to the fish helped them grow faster. Whether it was poetic nonsense or a form of water-based affirmation therapy, the idea held respect the fish, and they'll respect the pond. The fire pops. A spark flies up like a tiny comet and vanishes. You glance around the gathering again and notice something new near the back. A young woman sits with a stone bowl in her lap. She's slowly grinding something with a rounded pestle, her arms moving in easy, practiced circles. The scent is faint, but sweet, like roasted taro and sea salt. Someone leans toward you and whispers, "Pa'akai, I loco salt for the pond." You blink. Pond salt. Historians still argue whether the practice of flavoring food near ponds had spiritual or ecological roots. Some say it was symbolic, a blessing of the space. Others argue it had to do with microbial balance or pest control. Either way, it worked, and it made pond life taste better too. She finishes grinding and stands walking barefoot to the water's edge. She dips a finger into the bowl, scatters some into the pond with a flick of her hand, and speaks a phrase in a voice you can't quite hear. Then she turns, sets the bowl down, and disappears behind a grove of pandanus trees. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just the kind of moment that settles into the bones and stays there. You wonder if you'll ever learn the exact phrase she used. Probably not, but you know what it felt like. And in this place, that's more important than knowing. Someone nearby sighs contentedly. You do too, though it comes out more like a hum. The song, the story, the salt, the pond. All of it swirls now in your head like watercolor in warm water. In the shallows, something stirs. Not a splash, just the faintest ripple. You lean forward, slightly curious. A school of fish, maybe, or a single curious swimmer come to check the surface. It doesn't matter. You're part of the pond now, part of its memory, its rhythm, its silence. The hum of the night deepens, and you let go just a little more. You find yourself staring into the pond, not looking for anything, just letting the water reflect whatever it wants. The fire's glow ripples along the surface like a lazy thought, and your breath sinks with the tide, a slow in, a slow out. No waves crash here, just the whisper of brackish water sliding along basalt. You shift your weight just enough to feel the cushion of sand beneath your legs. Someone behind you begins softly strumming an ukulele, not the bright bouncing melodies from tourist postcards, but something older, slower. It moves like mist over a mountain ridge. The notes seem made for listening with your eyes closed. The person beside you nudges your elbow gently and offers a small bowl of something smooth and cool. You dip a finger into it. Poi. Thick, slightly sour, and perfect. It tastes like the root of everything, like the past has been stirred into a single spoonful and given back to you. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Poi, made from the pounded corn of taro, was a staple of the early Hawaiian diet and deeply intertwined with daily rituals, farming cycles, and even spiritual etiquette. In many households, speaking loudly or arguing while eating poi was considered a serious breach of respect. You catch yourself chewing slowly, almost reverently, not because you're trying to honor some ancient rule, but because it just feels right. A breeze carries the scent of salt and ironwood. It plays with the ends of your hair, and you feel for a second like the island is breathing through you, not metaphorically, literally, like you're a tide pool and the ocean has decided to visit. And now for your quirky tidbit. Some fish pond caretakers believed that feeding a small portion of their own meal to the pond spirits would result in a more abundant harvest. Whether it was poi coconut or steamed fish, they'd gently drop a bit into the water while murmuring thanks. Tonight, someone does just that. A piece of steamed taro slips from a leaf and into the pond with a tiny plop. It floats briefly before vanishing, and you feel, though nothing's been said, as though the offering has been accepted. The stars are out now, and the sky feels enormous, but it's not intimidating. It's like a canopy stretched gently above your thoughts. The constellations don't shout. They wink. You tilt your head to follow a cluster you vaguely recognize. Not Orion, not the Big Dipper, something else entirely. Ka makau nui o Maui, someone murmurs behind you, the great fishhook of Maui. You smile. Of course. Historians still argue whether these celestial names and navigation patterns were strictly remembered or creatively reimagined over generations. But whether you call it science or story, the knowledge held true. Sailors once crossed oceans with nothing but the stars and stories to steer by. You lie back, hands under your head, and let the songs and stories fade together. You're no longer a guest here. You're a ripple in the pond, a grain in the sand, a blink in the sky. And as someone pulls a light kapa cloth over your shoulders just before the last ukulele note falls silent, you understand something you didn't expect. This wasn't about fish. Not really. It was about how people learned to listen carefully, patiently, lovingly, to land, to sea, to sky, to each other. And in that listening, they learn how to feed a future. You close your eyes, not to sleep yet, but to sink. One last breath in, one last image, the pond curved and quiet, silvered under stars, and you're gone. You wake though you never truly slept, just drifted, carried by the lull of stories, soothed by a rhythm older than language. The fire is still crackling nearby, now low and ember red like a heartbeat at rest. You feel it before you hear it, the hush of the tide returning, water lapping gently against stone as if brushing the pond's edge with lullabies. Someone adds a bit more wood to the fire, not enough to startle, just enough to keep the dark from swallowing the circle whole. A quiet conversation hums from the far side of the pond. It's in Hawaiian, soft and smooth, but even without the words, you can feel what they mean. Gratitude, respect, that slow, ocean-deep kind of knowing that doesn't need to be explained. Here's your final mainstream historical fact. Loko'ia systems weren't just about aquaculture. They were sophisticated, place-based knowledge systems combining hydrology, ecology, astronomy, and spirituality. The people who tended them weren't simply farmers. They were engineers, stewards, philosophers, and poets of the sea. The person beside you may be the same one who offered the poi, leans over again, murmuring, "Malama I Kauai," care for the water. And that's it really. Everything you've seen, everything you've felt, it all flows back to that. Now, for your final quirky tidbit, in certain coastal communities, it was believed that ponds could remember their keepers, that generations of caretakers left behind not just knowledge, but mana, a spiritual residue that shaped how the water behaved, how the fish gathered, even how the wind moved across the surface. Historians still argue whether this belief was symbolic or literal. But when you look out at the pond, now still and silver under the moon, it's hard not to believe it has a memory. That it's seen more kindness than conflict, more quiet work than loud applause. Someone stands and begins folding the mats. No one says goodbye. They don't have to. Here, parting isn't a rupture, it's a ripple. Temporary, everything circles back. You rise to stretching slowly. You walk to the pond's edge and crouch down, dipping your fingers into the cool water. A final connection. You don't say anything aloud, but in your mind, you whisper something simple. Thank you. Above, the sky is smeared with starlight. You spot the fishhook again, glittering like a question you're no longer trying to answer. You walk the path back up the slope. It's gentler now, familiar, like it's been waiting to carry you all along. The wind follows you, playful, not pushy, and the ocean murmurs behind the trees, never far. You reach the top and pause one last time. Below, the pond curves like a cradle. The fire's last glow flickers against the dark. Somewhere in the trees, a bird rustles in its sleep. A leaf falls without hurry. You turn and step softly back into the waking world. Let's stay right here for just a moment longer. You've wandered deep tonight, through warm tides and stone walls, through whispered chants and starlit ponds. And now, as the journey winds to its close, your breath begins to settle into a slower rhythm, syncing with the soft imagined lapping of water at your feet. The world outside this story fades gently like morning mist retreating from the shore. You're still wrapped in quiet, still held in the memory of firelight, sandalwood smoke, and stories that circle never quite ending. Just like the fish in the pond, everything moves in loops, in returns, in rhythms older than time. Let your body soften now, sink deeper into the mattress or the couch or wherever you've curled up tonight. Let the weight of your limbs give way slowly, as if gravity itself has gone gentle. There's nothing left to do. No more waves to measure, no more walls to tend. Just a hush, a memory of ripples, a final breath that carries with it the salt of the sea and the hush of leaves swaying above ancient ponds. You've listened well. You've traveled far. And now you're home, wherever that may be, wrapped in quiet with the stars watching gently from above. Good night.